80 Days, adventurer and award-winning filmmaker Paul G. Roberts retraces the global footsteps of Phileas Fogg, hero of Jules Verne's most famous work.
I'd like to honour the Gadigal people of the Eora Nations, the rightful historic owners and custodians of these lands and all of Australia, and all respect is offered to their ancestors and tribal elders. Now I'm down here at marvellous Bondi Beach. It's Saturday morning in January, and that means summertime in Sydney. And for my Sydney film, I want to feature some of the unmissable experiences that I can do only in Sydney in summer, and the things that I love to do that makes my Sydney so unique. I'm down here at the world famous Bondi Beach. It's summer. The weather's going to be a hot one today, 30 degrees for you in the northern climes. That's bridging the 100 mark. And they've just put in a new Bondi Pavilion, which is like long overdue, which is one of Australia's greatest landmarks, Bondi Beach. Kind of hard to find a better view than this one, overlooking famous Pacific Ocean and Bondi Beach in the background. And as everybody here is heading out on the famous Bondi to Bronte track, one of the best coastal walks in all the world, without a doubt.
Sometimes there's no one else who loves me like you used to. Sometimes we're not ourselves, there's no one I can turn to. And I know all the feelings that we shared out in the past. And I know.
So here's a quick geography lesson that you may or may not know. When I was growing up in Australia, I was taught that there were 2 people per square kilometre. And Australia was a very peculiar place because it was very scarcely inhabited. But in reality, that's a little bit deceiving because much of the vast centre of our country is actually desolate desert and inhospitable to probably only the most ingeniously involved human beings, like our Indigenous natives or First Nations people, as they prefer to be called these days. So pretty much everybody chooses to live on the coastal fringes, like where I am now in Sydney. All the world's continents, Australia may well be the smallest, but it's also the only one to be entirely controlled and inhabited by a single country. Almost everybody knows that, though, that while Australia is a huge place in terms of land, it's also a pretty small place in terms of its population. But few people really understand the absolute scale of how sparsely populated the Australian continent actually is. Now, to help put these numbers into some perspective, Australia is comparable in size to the lower 48 United States states. And these 48 US states have a population of more than 300 million people, while Australia only has a population of a little more than 26 million. And this means there are 2 American states that actually have more people than the entirety of the Australian continent. And that's California with more than 39 million and Texas with more than 28 million. Now that means that Australia really only has 5 cities. There's Sydney, there's Melbourne, there's Brisbane, there's Perth and there's Adelaide. And nearly 2 out of every 3 Australians is in those cities, which makes Australia one of the most heavily urbanised nations in the world, with the overwhelming majority of the population, around 90%, concentrated into relatively small urban areas that only account for 0.22% of Australia's total land area, with half of the overall population living within these red areas and the other half living within these blue areas. 85% of all Australians live within just 50 kilometres of the coastline, meaning that there's hardly anyone deeper into the continent's vast interior, which is very unique. And Australia's coastal fringes, if you like, or their coastline, stretches almost 50,000 kilometres and is linked by over 10,000 pristine beaches, more than any other country in the world, just like this one here. And it's the reason why it's so popular, one of the reasons. Now, 85% of all Australians choose to live within 50 kilometres of the coast. So it makes the coast and the water an integral part of everyday life for Australians and a key distinguishing feature of our lifestyle. But no other place in the world sparkles brighter each December to March than Sydney during summer. And I'd say you can forget the Caribbean. It's nice, but it's not that nice. Bali, the Maldives, or even Tahiti. To me, Sydney rules over that period. The sun shines strong in a cloudless sky, although there are a few clouds today. Normally, the sun shines bright in a cloudless sky. And the white sails of the yachts dot the harbour. The jacarandas are in full bloom as the city emerges from winter with a newfound kind of sparkle. And my city of Sydney is known for its fabulous beach culture. So whether you're looking to park yourself on the sands like these people and take in the sun and the water, or maybe even learn to surf or scuba dive, perhaps explore the unique ecosystems of our idyllic rock pools, like there's one just around the corner here which I'll be going to shortly, You can investigate ancient Aboriginal rock carvings in ocean cliffs, in the open-air ocean pools, like there is one just here and there's another one on the far side, which is the Icebergs, and then there's more as you go down the coast. You can kayak to inner harbour beaches. You can take a stand-up paddleboard lesson. So much of Sydney revolves around its pristine blue waters, and access here is not determined by the size of your bank account, which is something that I love. Aussies sure know how to make the most of their world-class summer weather, and Sydney is a hotbed for outdoor activities. There's great food, world-class surf, and unbeatable good Sydney vibes. Now, many from the Northern Hemisphere come here fearful of our wildlife, but at the beach, the reality is, it's not the sharks, the blue-ringed octopus, the bluebottles, the stingrays, stonefish, sea snakes, nor even the crocodiles that will kill you in Sydney. And aside from skin cancer, probably the biggest threat that you face are our beaches themselves. There are rips, undertows, waves that can easily put a novice literally in deep water. It never ceases to amaze me how, despite all the warnings, and you see them all over the beach, signs, flags, lights, situations. In Sydney, the beaches are no joke. Now, you may have seen the reality series on cable TV or Netflix, Bondi Rescue. These guys, many of them who are friends of mine, they're the real deal. Far from being actors, they save real lives every day. And you can bet today, with the surf running the way that it is, they will be pulling dozens and dozens of people out of the surf and saving them from a certain death.
I've got a pulse. I've got a pulse. Yeah, I know, we're going to breathe him up. He's all right, mate. We got him. We got him, mate.
Keep breathing him up. I've got a good pulse, Chapo.
Yeah, it's all right.
Continue.
They're amazing athletes who perform heroic feats to keep the public safe every day of the year, not just in summer, not just today.
Mid-afternoon, and Harry's spots a beginner on a bodyboard. The rip is sweeping him out to the giant waves crashing onto the point.
The young bloke was about 200 metres offshore, so I knew I had a bit of a paddle on my hands to get out to him. But when the swell's up like this, you know, you can lose someone so quick, and that thought of losing a young bloke in a big swell like this, it'd take ages for us to even search for his body. Over this way. I approach the guy, and the first thing I tell all of them if they've got boards is take the leg rope off. They don't want to let go. Everyone wants to hold something. Everyone likes their blankie. Yeah, let go. Take your board off your arm. You take the board off your arm. I don't want his board hitting me. I don't want to hit him in the head, and it's going to get in the way when I'm paddling.
Backed up against the rocks, Harry's battles to make open water.
I don't want to be anywhere near the rocks. You come near the rocks, you get injured, you get sucked down the face, something happens to you. I want to stay on the board and I want to stay in water.
The bodyboarder's name is Josh, a visitor from interstate. He tries desperately to help paddle.
You can see the swell increase and the sets are getting bigger. All of a sudden, the wild, nature owns you.
Unable to penetrate the waves, Harry's finds a soft landing on the rocks.
I'm up the face of the rocks, I'm standing now.
Natural instinct is to run away from the crashing wave, but Harry's knows he must do the opposite.
Into the wave, jump into the wave, and then we just leap. Go, go, go. It washes us back up onto the spot that we're actually standing in. So, you know, we are so damn lucky. I see a second wave approaching. and I've just got to get this bloke, I've got to get him to run across the rock ledge and get him out of there.
Don't worry about the board, get up the rock.
Now, Bondi Rescue is one of the most popular reality shows ever created from Australia. And unlike Baywatch, that you may have seen before, with Pammy Anderson and David Hasselhoff, the Hoff, Bondi Rescue features the daily lives and routines of these real-life professional lifeguards patrolling Bondi Beach, Tamarama and some of the other ones. The popularity of this factual television program has reached a global audience and it's aired in 100 countries. The girls and boys have become kind of stars, and it's great to see them getting the accolades and credit they do for doing such an incredible job. Now, contrary to popular opinion, it's actually quite difficult to get eaten by a shark here in Sydney. But it's dead easy to drown at one of our beaches. In fact, in 2022, 55 people lost their lives to drowning in New South Wales water last year. Did you know that the sea temperature during the summer in Sydney can go up to as much as 23 degrees Celsius, which is 74 degrees Fahrenheit? And when Sydney has over 100 pristine world-class soft sand beaches to choose from, there's a lot of choices. And it's none of that volcanic sand like in Santorini or those awful pebbled beaches, those tiny awful pebbled beaches that you find in Italy, where you've often got to pay to get a perch on the beach. Bondi Beach is all fine sand, best in the world, and I've been to quite a few of the best beaches, supposedly. Now, Bondi Beach is literally only 15 minutes from the CBD, the city. I remember when I first moved here like 20 years ago, I found it really sort of cool that you would see kids with their surfboards going to school because they would be surfing in the morning before school and they would go surfing after school. You see them carrying the surfboards on trains and buses. It's just a normal part of life here. Now, Bondi is one of the most famous stretches of golden sand in Australia, and it's a top spot if you're keen to learn to surf. There are surf schools just right here. There's actually one surf school out in the water now. You can see them with the coloured polystyrene boards. And an expert surfing teacher will show you how to paddle, how to look for waves, look for this, how the ocean signs will be presented to you, how to do the snap so you can jump up on your board before the wave washes through. It's not as easy as it looks, and to be really good at it, again, you have to be an incredible athlete. And then on from Bondi, you have a stretch of coastline where there's a series of incredible beaches. You can take the coastal walk, the very famous coastal walk, which links them all as they go south down the coast. And in sequence you have Tamarama, which is my favourite, maybe because I live there, then Bronte, Gordons Bay, Clovelly, Coogee, Maroubra, and they're all incredible, trust me. North of the city, Manly is also a fantastic place to catch a wave and hosts the Australian Open of Surfing competition in February. Balmoral Beach in the harbour is sheltered and well suited for swimming, paddleboarding, kayaking, and Shelley Beach offers impressive snorkelling. And in fact, there's lots of harbour beaches like Milk Beach and Chinaman's Beach that are really kind of unique to Sydney because they're harbour beaches. Then you have the northern beaches that run all the way up to Palm Beach in that sort of promontory where the popular fiction soap Summer Bay was set. Sydney's beaches is that there is always, these amazing cafes and restaurants that are really kind of close to the beach. So literally you don't have to move. You can stay at the beach all day, make a day of it, a weekend of it, and just soak up every good bit that it has to offer. There's also shops at the back of Bondi where you can snap up some essential, genuinely authentic Australian swimwear. It all happens here. It's a really great lifestyle for the whole family. Now, once the shops have opened, do some shopping in the indie boutiques of Gould Street. Too Choosy, General Pants, there's a ton. Beck and Bridge. Pick up some bikinis or other funky pieces that you will not find anywhere else. Now, if you want to swim and aren't keen to be dodging and navigating the rips and waves and all of that kind of stuff, several of Sydney's beaches have sheltered open ocean pools, which are really cool, and I've only experienced them in Sydney. They include, there's one at Bondi, which is right down there, where the kids all sort of play around. Sometimes the waves come crashing over, but all that's part of the charm. And it's exactly the same water that you'd find out in the middle from the blue Pacific Ocean. There's another one in Bronte Beach, McIver's Ladies Baths, also known as Coogee Ladies Baths, is a scenic cliffside swimming spot just for the girls. To the southeast of Sydney, and the restored 1920s McCallum Pool at Cremorne Point in northern Sydney also has a great view of the city skyline together with the harbour. And there is also an open water swimming pool at Victoria Park, Petersham Park and Prince Alfred Park. Now in Sydney over summer, with all the good weather that we have, there's no shortage of live music and arts festivals. The summer season means amazing outdoor festivals, and unlike London, we normally don't need to worry about it raining, or maybe just a bit. Down at Mrs Macquarie's Point by the Sydney Botanical Gardens, the Harbour Life Festival in November is one of the biggest dance music events of the year, and the party overlooks the water, Sydney Opera House and the Sydney Harbour Bridge. You don't get a better view. The Sydney Festival in January also brings a huge range of live music and theatre. There's film screenings, exhibitions and art instalments to all venues throughout the city, making it easy for you to get your culture fix all through summer. Now, whilst all Sydney-siders and the world agree that our Harbour Bridge and Sydney Opera House are out-and-out national treasures, loved throughout the world. Now, the same cannot be said for the newest monstrous intrusion into the Sydney skyline. The Crown Casino Tower at Barangaroo is such an out-of-place eyesore. One cannot help but wonder how big the kickbacks and chronic corruption must have been when this pile of shit was approved by the Sydney Government Planning Department, whoever that is. Once a shipping container terminal, Barangaroo has almost seemingly overnight been transformed into a waterside shopping and dining district with towers on the way up. The area is named after an important and inspirational Aboriginal woman named Barangaroo, who was a Camaragal leader of the Eora Nation at the same time that the Europeans who colonised this area of Australia, which we just celebrated yesterday on the 26th of January, Invasion Day. I don't think there's many people anymore calling it Australia Day. Now, I for one find it really sad that such a proud legacy is tagged to such a shameful commercial and evil commercial entity. Just what Sydney needed most, another casino. I can only imagine what's next, putting one of these things on top of Ayers Rock perhaps. Now, you can ask any Sydney local their opinion of this tower. Be prepared to be instantly regaled with venomous, splenetic bile about what an utterly vile excrescence it is. It's disgusting. It's vulgar. It's an eyesore. It's Jamie Packer's Pecker. It looks like a giant, ugly glass cigar. Pecker's Packer, he's clearly got a need to compensate for something. But worse still, it's funded by the misery and ongoing ruination of countless families from Packer's organised crime-infested gambling empire. He was found so guilty, and his empire of Crown so deeply connected with organised crime and money laundering and human trafficking, the list goes on. He had to retire, step down from the board. Now, how anyone with a shred of decency in them could see it as anything but just awful. It's ugly because its purpose is ugly. God willing, let's hope some planes crash into it.
In 2015, the Barangaroo Reserve on Sydney Harbour opened to the public. 240 years ago, Barangaroo lived here. This is her legacy through the eyes of senior Aboriginal women who live in Sydney today.
If you go back 200 years, then certainly there would have been beautiful natural waterways and, vegetation. So to see this recreated, and they've actually honoured and revitalised Barangaroo is magnificent.
Barangaroo was such a special woman, and now she's pretty visible and people want to know more about her, I think.
I agree with you. I think people need to know about what a strong Aboriginal woman she was.
I would say that Barangaroo is one of the heroines of the Australian story. She was a woman of First Nations. She was a woman that saw what life was like before British colonisation or invasion, whatever you want to call it, and survived.
Australian Aboriginal flag, and it's just a few days away from Invasion Day or Australia Day, depending on what you believe, and there'll be a lot of passionate people out in force on the 26th of January. Now, Bondi or Bondi is an Aboriginal word meaning breaking water over rocks. And the Gadigal, who first witnessed the breaking water here, and they witnessed the first fleet around the same time in 1788, they recorded their impressions of the Europeans by engraving a fully rigged ship at Bellevue Hill, just outside of Waverley, which is the suburb or the local council area. And today, it's accepted that the Gadigal, Biddigagal and Biddigagal are the clan groups that occupied the area between Sydney Harbour and Botany Bay, which also included this area outside Waverley. Back then, 1788, approximately 1,500 Aboriginal people called this area home, all before European settlement. In traditional Aboriginal societies, boundaries were not defined the same way that Western boundaries are defined and maintained. The Aboriginal people's relationship with their country was spiritually motivated and connected to their dreaming. It wasn't a map of blocks and postcodes and things like that, where people mapped out their ownership. The Aboriginals were a spiritual part of the land. Ownership was a very foreign concept to them. In coastal Sydney, Aboriginal people were heavily impacted by colonisation, including the development of their traditional lands and past government policies that restricted the teaching of traditional knowledge, something that again feeds into our litany of shame as part of the white people who came to colonise and invade Aboriginal lands. So what do I love about when it's summer in Sydney? Well, you really don't need to go far from the coast, all the way Bondi to Coochie. Bondi is where the beautiful people live, the influencers and all that kind of stuff. In summer, granted there are hordes of backpackers, tourists, but it's still a blast. You know, it's filled with great restaurants, from cheap and cheerful Thai places and pizzerias, all the way through to gastronomical temples like Icebergs. There's cafes, there's shops, as well as the beach. And whilst it is now chronically expensive to live here, as with all the beach suburbs, it's still a magical place and something, if you get a chance to come to Sydney in summer, in our summer between the months of November and March, it is incredible. Now, one thing about Sydney in summer, from like sun up in the morning, it's a hive of activity. I'm here at the pit where people are working out. In the morning, you find people with their personal trainers. They'll be doing yoga, obviously going surfing, hitting the sand for some soft sand running. It's never ending. And whilst the Bondi lifestyle might be a little bit hedonistic, it's also very health conscious. And people are very into taking care of their bodies and looking good when they're stripped down. Here I am, just approaching the Bondi Icebergs Surf Lifesaving Club, which is open to the public, and you don't have to be a member or an iceberg to go in. So let's check it out. And here we are with the famous Bondi Icebergs pool right behind me. And you can see even on a Tuesday morning, with a beautiful day like today, it's going to be 30 degrees Celsius. There's a swell running, which means there'll be waves breaking in the various break points. And there's a lot of people down there taking the time to strip down, get their bodies nice and brown. And it really is, it's truly a special, incredible place. Probably one of the most Instagrammable spots in the entire world. And look at that Bondi. No matter how many times I see it, it is still spectacular. So Bondi Icebergs, it's the oldest licensed swimming club in all of Sydney, maybe even New South Wales, maybe even Australia. And the original pool and club was actually formulated to help surf lifesavers stay in shape during the winter months. And the rule is to become a member, I don't know if it still is, but you literally had to swim through 5 years of winters every weekend with only a few lapses to become an official member. Now, it's probably fair to say that Sydney's not the coldest place in the world, but in the middle of winter it can be a bit nippy, definitely not like today. And it's a spectacular attraction. It's kind of like they haven't really changed anything about it. It's still open to the public for kind of a nominal fee. And sure, there's a fancy restaurant on the top, but what are you going to do? All the rich people get hungry. And when the tide is high, like it is today, and you have a big swell running, this is the spectacular result you get from the waves crashing over the side of the pool in quite a dramatic fashion. And I couldn't have scripted this any better for the day today. It's a cracker.
Hospitality icon Morris Terzini and Icebergs are deservedly world famous. I've known Morris for over 20 years, way back to the days of Cafe e Cucina and Checkpoint Charlie in Melbourne. I wanted to get his perspective on the lockouts. As an operator whose empire now spans multiple award-winning restaurants, nightclubs and bars in not only Sydney, but Melbourne and also now Bali. And he also has Icebergs New Year's Day party, which has become a Sydney institution.
Well, that's when I first arrived in Sydney, so that was a quite exciting time for me. We actually opened up Otto, I think the same month or a month before the Olympics, and you know, the volume of people that were coming through was pretty incredible. And yes, it was a very, very vibrant city and business was incredibly fantastic. One of the reasons I started in restaurants and bars and clubs and so on is because I was always fascinated by nightlife. I enjoyed working at night. My uncle ran clubs at night for years. You know, he wouldn't get home till 10 a.m. in the mornings. My father ran clubs at night. For us, nightlife has always just been part of our family history.
Now, my friend Maurice Terzini has been at the head of Icebergs for 20 years now, and Icebergs is arguably one of the top 3 or 4 iconic restaurants in Sydney and probably all of Australia. And no reason it doesn't hurt to have the Grand Pacific Ocean looking majestic every time anyone goes there. So it's famed for location, obviously, but also its hospitality. Maurice runs a really tight ship. He's a seasoned pro. I used to go to his first restaurant in South Yarra in Melbourne, Cafe Ecocina, which is also iconic. In fact, everything Maurice has ever touched has been gold status. And it's a who's who of celebrities. Any big name celebrity who comes to Sydney is definitely going to be booking a table at Icebergs. That is a fact. So art and personalities that have made it an iconic restaurant. It stands sentinel over Bondi Beach. It's kind of the highest building structure wherever you look around. And it's powerful Pacific Ocean. But despite the beauty, the path of concept to restaurant hasn't been an easy path for Maurice, and he's had some rough trots. I remember there was a few years where the media, John Lethlean from the Australian, actually savaged him to trash the reputation, and he's been working hard to build it back ever since then. And what Maurice was kind of asking people to see was what wasn't there, not just the view, and he wanted to keep it that way. The ocean was to be the hero, but the rest of it, he wanted it in essence to be made invisible, a place where conversations dominated the food, where art and music and beauty all shared a place at the table, and that's been a big manifesto of Maurice throughout his career. Now, the Bondi to Coogee walk is one of the most incredible coastline cliff walks in the world. And I would put that up against any other that I've even seen or even heard about. And if you want to go all the way to Coogee, you get to see Gordon's Bay and all the other gorgeous locales and beaches along the way. And they are spectacular, not just, you know, starting at Bondi. Then you have my favorite, Tamarama. Before that, there's actually Mackenzie's rock pools. Then a little bit further on from that is Bronte. Then there's Clovelly, Gordon's Bay, and finally Coogee. So you can do this as a 2-hour trek. You can run it, you can take your dog. You can stop off along the way at each of the beaches and have a swim. Stop at one of the many cafes, get a coffee, have something to eat. And there is nothing better when you're immersed in nature with the sound of the ocean roaring behind you, working up a bit of a sweat, taking in the incredible view. It's such an invigorating exercise in nature. It really is like no other that I've seen anywhere in the world. And every year it's the site of the famous Sculptures by the Sea, which is one of the biggest sculpture exhibitions in the world, where they turn the outdoors of Sydney's coastline into an incredible art gallery. And then we have someone swimming out there in the ocean. And this is literally just the first turn. It just keeps going and going and going. And this time of the year, you're going to have lots of locals as well as tons of tourists doing this thing for the first time, and I'm sure they think it's just as spectacular as I do. So I'm now on part of the famous coastal walk track, heading my way up from Bronte to Tamarama with the roar of the ocean in my ears behind me. And there's no better way to start the day. Get up, head down to the beach, whether you take your surfboard or just go down there for a swim. You can body surf in the waves. It's free for all. Something that Australia is blessed to have. Yeah, there's 50,000 miles of coastline in Australia, more than 10,000 world-class sandy beaches. This is the track. We go up these steps and we're up to Tamarama. There are all the kids down there. That's the track going down to Bronte, and then you go up that road. You can see Bondi behind me, and out in the ocean today, that's the Pacific Ocean, the biggest one in the world, and there's a good swell running. And the waves are probably 4 to 5 foot, and you could have an international world-class surfing competition in those kinds of conditions. So we're just walking around Tamarama now. You get a sense of how popular it is. That's the sand of Tamarama Beach. The Surf Lifesaving Club on top of it. It's a great place to have a dog here. It's dog's paradise. Tamarama Beach there. The rocks in the background there. That's Mackenzie's Beach, which is a dog-friendly environment full of rock pools, which you can jump off into the ocean. Lots of good scenery wherever you look in Tamarama. Everything's so sporty here. You've got a beach volleyball game down there on the soft sand of Tamarama. It's all free. You don't pay for anything. And that's another thing about the Sydney lifestyle. Because everyone's so used to getting to the beach and getting stripped down in their swimwear to go swimming or surfing or whatever. Because you're seeing your body all the time, you're conscious of it, other people are seeing it. So you want to keep it in good condition so it looks good. That's another factor that feeds into the reason why everyone's so healthy, exercising all the time. They build it into their lifestyle. Just like brushing your teeth. Like when you want to meet a friend, you meet them for a walk, like these two ladies. You can multitask. And I was recently in California, and California says they've got a beach culture. Their beach culture is nothing compared to the one we have here in Australia and Sydney. So I'm just walking down the steps now to the Tamarama Park. As I said earlier, the one hassle about these beachside suburbs, there's such little public parking. There's no car parks or anything. So it's only on-street car parking and private parking garages. So literally they only have enough, barely have enough, for the residents who live here.
I could feel at the time there was no way of knowing. Falling leaves in the night, who can say where they're blowing? As free as the wind, of fully learning why the sea on the tide has no way of turning. More than this, you know there's nothing more than this. Tell me one thing more than this. Oh, there's nothing.
I'm just walking down to Tamarama Beach. Now I want to tell you a little bit of the history of famous Glamarama, one of the most incredible beaches in all of the world. Now Glamarama was first, I guess, located on a military map hundreds of years ago.
There was no way of knowing, like a dream in the night. Who can say where it's going? Now here in the world, maybe I'm learning why the sea on the tide has no way.
Now this is the full story of Glamarama, my Tamarama. Now Glamarama is known by that name by many locals and people of Sydney because of the glamorous people and bodies that happen to frequent the sand here, and also the surfers and everybody. Many famous people have lived in this area, and it has a really rich history. But more than that, it's probably one of the most special and spectacular, almost private beaches in Sydney there is. And the reason for its specialness is that it's a tiny little beach parked between Bondi on the north side and Bronte on the far side. And then there's Mackenzie's Bay, which is just ducked in a rock sort of ledge, which is just underneath it, to form this incredible natural habitat, if you like. Now, I was lucky enough to buy a house here 15 years ago. And in Sydney, we've seen incredible rises in property year on year for pretty much the last 20 years. I sold it when I got divorced and gave it to my partner. But it was an amazing house, and this was my home for over a decade, and it still has many, many special memories for me. Now, residents pretty much have the whole Pacific Ocean as kind of as their private backyard. The actual parking situation, the public transport situation to Tamarama is very light. There's one bus that runs along here, and there's only street parking. And it's barely enough for the residents that happen to live here. So the people that do live in this environment or choose to come down from Bondi or Bronte pretty much have the beach to themselves. And you can see that today. There's literally probably a dozen people on the whole beach. And in addition to this, it's an incredible place if you're a pet owner. Now, I had a dog, Subi, who died tragically at age 14, who I had all his life. And we used to come down here and on the sand and run all the way along the Bondi track, all the way to North Bondi. Have a swim, have a coffee, get breakfast, and then run back. It was an incredible start to the day. And I guess my dog Subi, who was a Samoyed, must have thought this was the best life possible, and it was. Just in front of me here is Mackenzie's Bay, which are all rock pools. And that itself is a pet's paradise. There's sand, there's water, there's cliffs, there's incredible, interesting creatures walking around like crabs and fish. And Subi, my dog, couldn't wait to investigate everything. He'd get hit by waves coming in and be squealing out, so I had to come and save him. But it was all part of the adventure. The sea life here also is kind of interesting. And Subi was the first dog ever in the eastern suburbs, probably in all of New South Wales, who decided that a blue bottle, yes, a dangerous neurotoxic blue bottle, looked like something delicious to eat. So I was doing something and then I hear this screaming, squealing. And I run down and there's Subi and he's got the tentacles of a blue bottle out his mouth. So he must have thought it looked delicious and thought he'd have a munch. So I ripped it out of his mouth and all the stinging was in my hands. Took him to the surf lifesaving tower at Bronte, at Tamarama. And I was told that that's the first instance of a dog ever trying to eat a blue bottle in the history of Tamarama. And it's not only like the incredible weather and the waves and everything you get here. In season, you are treated to some incredible feats of nature, where just out here, where the surfers will be up at sunrise, pods of dolphins, there could be as many as 16 in a pod, performing acrobatics. Not just acrobatics on their own, they're performing acrobatics in and amongst the surfers, mimicking them catching waves. And they'll be leaping out of the water like some 10, 15 meters in the air. Something you would never see at SeaWorld. And then in season, you also get whales migrating north for their mating season to warmer waters. And they come right up against the coast, so you can literally reach out and touch them. It's just an amazing place, an amazing piece of paradise nature, and there's nothing like it in the whole planet.
More than this, you know there's nothing more than this. Tell me one thing more than this. There's nothing.
Now, a brief history of Tamarama, the beach in the background here. The painting that you're seeing, or the picture of the painting you're seeing, is Julian Ashton's Tamarama. And it was painted in 1899 by an English artist, Julia Rossi Ashton. And she painted the beach titled 40 Years Ago, A Summer Evening. And the idyllic painting of a woman lying on the rocks at Mackenzie's, draped in gauze in the nude, is a highly romantic view of the area. And Tamarama, situated between Bondi on that side and Bronte on that side, has a fascinating history, and many famous locals have called the area home, not including myself. And its most notable residents would probably have to be Alice, which was Waverley Council's only elephant to live in this local government area. It's also famous for being the home of David Fletcher, who was the first Lord Mayor of Waverley. The first recorded notice of this area, we know as Tamarama, was in the 1830s, when it was identified on a military map. You know, 1830s is not long after the first fleet coming into the area. And it was marked as Gamma Gamma, which is an Aboriginal indigenous word believed to be meaning storm. And with rock shelters along the coastline making good living quarters, they provided shelter for the First Nations people and a readily source of food from the ocean. And there was also a plentiful supply of fresh water from the gully at the back of the Tamarama Reserve. And there's clear evidence that in the period before European settlement, there was Indigenous occupation all throughout this area. You know, it's one particular midden atop a sandstone rock ledge at Tamarama has been classified by the National Parks and Wildlife Service as a site of archaeological importance, because beachside shelters with midden deposits are rare on the Tasman seacoast. And to protect it, the exact location, it's actually hidden. And I believe it's just down where I was filming before at Mackenzie's Bay. Now, rock carvings on the coastal walk at Mackenzie's Bay depict various fish species, as they were probably formed by the carver pecking into the rock small holes with a pointed stone or a shell, then later joining the shapes to make an image of a fish or a whale by grooving the rock. And these abraded grooves carved into the rock face represent either a shark or a whale or two fish. And the age of these engravings is believed to date back well beyond 2,000 years ago. incredible. We have some serious surf today. It's a big swell running. It's hard to tell how big the waves are, but I'd say that's like 4 foot, 5 foot in the old measurements. And they would have World Cup surfing competitions in that kind of conditions. Just down here, kind of on the left-hand side of Tamarama Beach, is Mackenzie's Bay, where you can see these rock ledges where the surf is actually breaking directly onto. And that turns into a private kind of beach where there's sand at certain times of high tide, but normally it's the rock pools, and you see this surfer here preparing to leap off the rocks into the lineup, which is something not recommended for beginners. Now behind me is the famous Tamarama Gully. That's where the other part of Wonderland was set up. And it's also the water source that the First Nations people would depend on for their habitation of the local beach areas. Right behind me is the incredible Mackenzie's Bay, which is the beach, which is the bay just there, and the rock pools and private beach and cliff faces that are above it. And Mackenzie's is nestled snugly just before the rock cliffs turn into Tamarama Beach. And although unknown to many visitors, Waverley's Aboriginal cultural heritage can be identified through a range of archaeological remains and natural features of Waverley landscape. Mackenzie's amongst them. There are currently 11 registered Aboriginal archaeological sites in the Waverley area. And the rock carvings that are in the cliffs at Mackenzie's that are actually cordoned off from visitors to preserve the archaeological relics are believed to be in excess of 2,000 years old. And you can see that the images of fish and whales have been created by the native population some 2,000 years ago, banging into the rock face with a sharp implement and then throwing out grooves to create the images of the sea life that they were walking for. The rock pools where my dog Subi used to choose to eat blue bottles. to tell you the story of Wonderland, and this is an incredible story about the history of Tamarama. In 1906, entertainment entrepreneur of growing prominence was William Anderson, who leased the land formerly occupied by the Bondi Aquarium, which was actually in this area many years ago, minus a 12-foot strip that would allow, of coastline that would allow the residents and swimmers to actually have access to the beach. He also leased further land at the back of Tamarama, which is called the Gully, the Tamarama Gully, then known as the Tamarama Glen, to create his outdoor entertainment masterpiece, Wonderland City. Now this is 1906. He was a crazy genius, probably rival of P.T. Barnum or Australia's version of P.T. Barnum. Now the main entrance was a large weatherboard building in Wonderland Avenue, just to my left, and where it joined the bottom of Fletcher Street. Now the entrance price back in 1906 was 6 pence for adults and 3 pence for children, with additional fees for the rides that you went on. It opened on 1st of December 1906 and claimed to equal those famous entertainment or carnival sites such as Coney Island in New York and White City in Chicago. It was no rinky-dink show. Like, he employed 160 people, and there were 70 turnstiles to actually admit the 2,000 plus people who would come every weekend. He was doing a brisk trade, and Wonderland was known for its novelty and shocking outdoor acts. And William Anderson was the consummate showman. One time he organised for a couple to be married at Wonderland City and paraded the wedded couple around on the back of his pet elephant, Alice. And then there was the daredevil performer, Jack Lewis, who roller skated down a giant ramp, flew off the other end, did a somersault, flew through a burning hoop and landed in a tank filled with sharks. Now the daredevil, Mr. Lewis, survived the ordeal and definitely shocked the crowd. And then there was the Arum Scarum airship, which was a blimp that was secured and tethered here that would take people up for views of the bays and beaches. And it would sometimes crash, and there was more controversy around that. A brouhaha sort of blew up between the residents and people that were swimmers, and they started complaining to the local media. There was complaints about the mistreatment of animals and also the Arum Scarum thing being dangerous. Wonderland, well, regardless of the disputes and claims and I guess controversy, Wonderland was the precursor of today's Luna Park and set unprecedented standards and broke new grounds for Australian outdoor entertainment in Sydney. In its day, it was the largest outdoor entertainment arena or operation in the entire Southern Hemisphere. And its decline does not diminish the grandeur of William Anderson's vision. And although little is visible today, with the exception of the two paths on the northern boundary of Tamarama Gully, the New South Wales Heritage Office still considers the site to be of archaeological significance and celebrates, the Surf Lifesaving Club with a mural celebrates the legacy and part it played in the early formation of that club. Good on you, Woody.
Be mindful that there is a really strong rip current in this northern corner. We've got a few people out this morning. Be mindful if you're not a strong swimmer.
Yeah, that's out that area there. The lifeguards are reminding people that there's a really strong rip in the northern corner, and these rips are no joke. They used to call one of these the Bronte Express, that you slip into it and literally in 10 seconds you're pulled around the corner, you know, nearly a mile down or 2 kilometres down the beach to Bronte, and there's nothing you can do about it. So this is the amazing rock pools that I used to take my dog to every morning. Now I'm down in the sand here, like right on the beach. Got my thongs off, just walking over to Mackenzie's Bay, or Mackenzie's Beach. The water's beautiful. This brings back so many memories to me.